Today, we continue the conversation with an Iranian writer-filmmaker who traveled to Afghanistan in 2006 to uncover why women at alarming rates were self-burning as a form of suicide. Sanaz Fotouhi obtained her master's at the University of Hong Kong and later her PhD at the University of New South Wales in Australia. Exploring the meaning and identity of the mass dispersion of Iranians since the Islamic Revolution, she brings her own life experience to the book she writes and the movies she makes. As one of the founding members of the Persian Film Festival in Australia, you might assume that she creates documentaries, she writes books, and everyone just laps them up. Her story is much more real than that. This conversation is about the resilience and journey of a woman who believes that a book needs to be read, and she believes it so much that she persisted with publishers for 14 years. It is a real celebration of that determination to stay in the game. And it really speaks to this precipice, like literally days away from the launch of Love, Marriage in Kabul. 14 years in the making this book was. So Sanaz, what a great time to speak with you. I mean, I imagine you're busy, but thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on this show.
Yeah, I know. It's going to be exciting. It's a great time to be able to talk about something that's been so long in the making. It must just have been quite a journey for you, hey?
Oh, incredible. There were, some times where I'm like, do I really want to do this? But it feels unreal. It really feels unreal. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I feel that that part of your story is what really drew me in. It was really relatable. But I'd love, before we kind of get into where you are today, if you could take us into living in Iran at a young age, growing up during the Iran-Iraq War. What was that like?
Well, I was actually a child of war. I was born right in the middle of the war between Iran and Iraq, which went on for 8 years. So the first 8 years of my life I remember the war very clearly in the first 8 years. And during this time, a door opened for me through my dad's interest in reading and writing to become interested in literature. So what he used to do is, because he worked near a space where there was a lot of bookshops, so what he would do is every week he would buy me a little book and then he would hide it in his briefcase. And then when he would come home, I would scavenger in his briefcase and find that book and I'll read it. And it was such a joy and such an excitement, to look for that book and see what he's brought for me that week. And it really planted the seeds of an interest in reading and writing and, the literary aspects of things, which is, not what many people would really grapple with when you're in that situation, because it's like, for a lot of people, it's just basic survival every day living. But for me, it became an escape. It became like an imagination. And when I was about 8, I must have been in year 1 or 2. There's a little magazine for kids in Iran. It was back then. And it's called like a children's journal, Kehan Bachaha in Farsi. And they used to print kids' stories in one section of it. And then one day in school, I learned that I could actually send my story to this magazine, and it was a nationwide magazine, and it went through all the schools and all the kiosks. And I wrote this little 5-story, six-line story that actually got published.
Wow.
And it was such a joy, and it was about this little girl who is sitting in her room at night, and then she can't sleep, and some light comes in through the window, and the girl's like, oh my God, what are you? And the light's like, I am the night angel, and every night that you're sleeping, I come and visit you, but tonight, since you're awake, I'm here, you can see me. And the girl's like, well, since you're here, take me on a journey. And the angel's like, sure, I'll take you on a journey. And then they go on this journey all around the world, and then she brings her back. So it was that moment when that was published, and when I saw it published, I was like, wow, this is an incredible feeling, and I want to be a writer. So
You made that decision after you got published there.
I made that decision. I was like 8 years old. I remember it very clearly. Yeah.
It's amazing you're telling that story, because I'm like, that sounds a lot like her life. Um, in terms of the light coming in and the escape that you found in the books in your father's briefcase. But I would love, just give me a little more context, because I can imagine 90% of the people listening will never have known a war-torn environment, never have grown up in one. My father-in-law was born in a bomb shelter in the UK, in London. And, the stories of that, for him, it's difficult sometimes to share, because to him, it was just normal. Of course that happened. Like, I think of it when I'm having my child, like his mother was amidst other people delivering a child, and he had a sister. And so it starts to come to life for me as I imagine this is an actual mother's. So paint a little picture for me. When you're born into, you said, this war that you remember, what is actually happening every day? Like, are you experiencing fear? Do you walk to school and there's danger? Do you not go to school? What happens?
Well, it's interesting because one of the stories that my mom tells me is when I was in her tummy. So we used to see the planes going up, and we used to see the missiles, like it just there, and then you would actually hear them, bang, and then there's some, you could see the smoke sometimes, even though we were in Tehran, which is not the heart of the war, because
Mhm.
the majority of it happened in the south, but you still got impacted. And one of the stories my mom says is when I was in her tummy, I must have been really little, like maybe like so little that I wasn't really moving.
Yeah.
So she said that there was a bomb, and what happened is that she got so scared that
Mhm.
she felt me just swoosh through one side to the other side of her tummy. And it was like she was so distraught, because she's like, oh my god, what's happening to this child? And it's amazing because
Wow.
we just grew up with that kind of
Mhm.
thing all around us, and it's so normal, like there would be the red alarm going off very occasionally, and then we would all run into the basement and hide in the basement. And then in the basement there was this we used to put this blanket to cover up the light at night, so that the aircrafts wouldn't see the majority of the places which are livable.
Wow.
And yeah, it was quite dull and grim, because don't forget that we just also come out of a revolution which was finding its feet.
Mhm.
So the country was finding its feet and then also losing its feet at the same time, so which was a lot of pressure on everybody,
Absolutely.
and the degree of, like, when I look back at it now, trauma, if you want to say it, is so normalized. I don't even see it as trauma. And then when something happens and I go, oh wow, that's actually quite traumatic. But it's become so normalized. And then I'm like, well, all people in my generation and older who experienced that period have it, and it's just so normal.
Yeah,
So
I lived with someone that was in, she's, yeah, this age as well, and she hadn't felt that she was that impacted. She was a teenager, and she also had these sirens,
mm,
and the parents, they didn't go in the basement. They used to go to a communal one, and she remembers never going. She stayed at home, and all her family went, and she would just stay in her bed. And she thought, well, that she just told it matter of factly, almost like you are, until at work they did like this kind of silent fire drill, and she was on
mm.
a business call, and the alarm went off, and she just stopped speaking, and the person, for about 5 minutes, she wasn't there. And she came home. We were living with her in Switzerland, and she came home and shared that, and I was like, she's like, something happened to me, and she was like reliving it or something. She went to another place, and like you said, trauma. Um, yeah. And so all these years, like, you've just had a baby. So imagine your mom about to have a baby in that environment and what that would have been like as well. Goodness.
And look, it brings a lot of sympathy when I look back at my mom, you know. It's like, wow, you had to deal with all that and it's mere survival. You know, she had to not only worry about like bringing, like having healthy living children, being concerned that we're going to actually live. She had to also like deal with lining up because we used to get food coupons for like, you know, cheap like government subsidized things. So she
Mhm.
used to go and line up for the food coupons, and she used to buy seasonal stuff, cut them up, like pack them, freeze them. So it was full on, and it brings so much sympathy when you look back at it from that perspective.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that because I think, so, I have a curiosity, but never a lived experience. So, yeah, just amazing what you've been through. And when, like you said, it was just normal to you. However, did you dream? I know you were dreaming about the books and in your imagination. Did you dream one day of leaving your country and exploring the world?
Look, not in those terms, but what I used to do is I had a classmate when I was in the first grade, and she was this little cute girl. And she had this mom and dad who were really cool, and they used to pick her up, and then they would disappear. She wouldn't come to school for weeks and weeks, and then she would turn up all tanned, you know, and then she'd be like, "Oh, well, I've just been to India, or I've just been to Dubai," you know. And then in my little mind, I'll go like, "Huh? Where?" You know, it was incomprehensible for me coming from the background that we did, you know. And then what I used to do is I used to lie in our garden and look up in the sky, and then I used to see the planes coming over, you know, flying. And I used to just remember sitting there and imagining myself being in that plane and imagining where it's going. I had no idea what Dubai looked like, India looked like, but like there was this longing in me to experience that. And I didn't know how or it was possible because we didn't even have enough. My dad was working two jobs. We could just barely make ends meet. I'd never been on a plane. The only holiday we had was like just domestic and usually very cheap, and it was just impossible for us to do that. And like I somehow it just manifested, and here we are. You know, like many years later.
Thank you for saying that because that's what my mind was as I was hearing that the longing and the looking, the imagining that you were doing is really beautiful. So when you first left your country for the first time, was it to go to university in Hong Kong? Was that your first
Oh
leaving?
no, no. So the first time was my dad used to work as a banker. He's a banker, and he got actually posted to go to Japan.
Oh,
So we moved when I was 12, 11, 12. We moved from Tehran to Tokyo.
wow.
So yeah, so we lived in Japan for about 4 years. Then it was meant to be a short, you know, it was meant to be a 2 year post, got extended. Then we moved to America. So he got posted to New York, and then eventually to Los Angeles, and then eventually to Hong Kong. So yeah, so that's the journey in some.
Wow. So I'm just visualizing the 12-year-old landing in Tokyo and then
Mm.
in New York and LA. Okay, so my question is, what was it like when you experienced yourself as Iranian for the first time? Because when you're like, I'm Canadian, so you're just Canadian, everybody else is, and then you move away and then it's different, like people have a perception of you. So what did you experience that you can recall of your identity and where you come from as you moved into new cultures?
Well, that period actually is, I would say it's a very impactful period for me, um, because there's a lot of trauma around it, a lot of
Mm.
charge that I have dealt with, you know, over the years,
Oh,
and
wow.
also a lot of impact on who I am, you know, like
Okay.
the resilience that I got is from that because like Like
Mm.
imagine being 12 years old, not speaking any English, not speaking any Japanese, and then being thrown into the deep end of going, okay, you're going into an international school where you have to speak English
Mm.
and being different, you know. And so it was it was very challenging,
Yes.
and it developed me into who I am today. That's all I can say. You know, the resilience
Yeah,
of like, you know, like I can ride it out through tough situations.
yeah, got it. Because
Yeah.
I didn't want to gloss over that because I'm visualizing she doesn't speak Japanese, I'm pretty sure. And then you end up getting, you go to university in Hong Kong. So, you, and by the way, do you do an English degree there? Is that how that
Yeah.
works?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then what actually brings you to Australia where you currently are?
Well, so I met Amin Palangi, who we made the film together with actually. We traveled to Afghanistan with. So I met
Okay.
him and then moved for him
Yeah,
with
got
him.
it. And you
Yeah.
met him in somewhere, obviously in Hong Kong or
No, I met him at a conference in Iran actually. So he was invited from Australia. I was invited from Hong Kong, and then we met.
yes.
And then we got married, and then I moved for him to Australia.
Wow. Okay. So here you are in Australia. Had lots of resilience training through your life to build you up to, and you mean you're doing a PhD, in Australia. So you're quite an academic. What spurs you on to actually travel to Afghanistan to make the film in 2006? Like what was that just obvious that you would do that? Or did you go through something to choose to go there?
Well, two things. It's interesting talking about manifestation.
Mm,
As years before this, because I'm a very avid journaler, I journal a
mhm.
lot. And ever since I remember, I have journaled. Ever since I could write, I've been journaling. And every year, I used to write these lists of what I want to do in my life, what I want to do this year, next year. You know, it's just natural. No one ever taught me. It just felt right, you know, to kind of envision the year. And somehow, somewhere, I became interested in Afghanistan, maybe through a movie. I don't remember particularly when I saw stuff about Afghanistan, and I was like, wow, wouldn't it be cool to go to this country and experience it, and then
Mm,
also find a way to help its people, you know,
mm,
because it's a country which is devastated, right?
mm,
And then my dream was maybe I'll be an NGO worker, maybe I'll be a journalist. And I explored working with CNN, and it didn't work out, you know. So it's like I had that desire. And in 2003, 2 or 3, I don't particularly remember, but I mentioned this in the book. My dad, who was retired, was suddenly given a call saying, hey, you know, we are going to open this bank hub in Kabul. And this is right after the Taliban have left, right? And nobody wants to actually volunteer to go to Afghanistan. And they're like, do you want to come help us? Because he was, you know, he had a lot of experience. And everyone is like, oh my God, are you crazy? You want to go to Afghanistan at the height of all this situation?
mm.
And I was like, you should go. You should go. You'll be fine, you know. And I was sure he'll be fine, you know. And he did. And that opened an opportunity for us to travel. So when he was there for a few years, Amin and I traveled to Afghanistan because Amin is a filmmaker. And so we went and we were like, well, this is amazing. Every corner you turn, there is a story to be told and made.
Sure.
So yeah, so that's how we actually gained an entrance into Afghanistan and what became the subsequent trips.
And meeting these women in Afghanistan who self-burn as a form of suicide, like what did you learn about the state of things in Afghanistan when you met those women?
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
um, how severe the situation has been. was. It's changing now slightly, very, very slightly. But how severe the situation was for women. Because here I was, thinking, the situation in Iran for women was bad. You know, that's what I thought. And then when you go to somewhere like Afghanistan, you're like, oh my God, the situation in Iran for women is not bad. It's all relative, yeah.
Right.
And yeah, it's all it's a sliding scale of where you are and what expectation and what freedoms and whatever that means in that culture. But for the women back then, especially 2006 when we were there, it was like, oh wow, they've just come out of one of the strictest Islamic regimes in the world, where they've been cooped up, no education. There's all these traditions, there's all these pressures, there's people coming back from other countries because the country's opened up, but it's poor, so people have bring in their poverty, there's forced marriage. So it was severe, it was devastating. It was absolutely like just being present to it was really humbling and humiliating, and just being a woman and experiencing that, I felt ashamed actually of what's going on, and how we as the world are not getting it, and we were not contributing the way we should because we're just preoccupied with other concepts. So
like you said, like that, yeah, where people are, they think what they're going through is the worst. And then, like you said, there's so many things. Clearly, if someone's self-burning, to end it, it's really bad. And so when you create a documentary to really bring this forward, and it wasn't as well received as you had hoped, what did you do with that?
well, because it was so confronting, people are like, we don't want to know about this. It's just too much, right? So what we did was we kept persisting. We're like, you know what? We need to make another film. So for 2-3 years after that, we kept looking for ideas. And that's how the second documentary, Love, Marriage in Kabul, came along, which was then we traveled with Mahbouba Ravi, who has a charity in Australia. And we traveled with her. We stayed for a month with her, where she was following one of the first boys that she saved through her charity to help him see this marriage through to this girl across the valley that he was in love with. And we all knew if that marriage didn't happen, the fate of that girl was going to be like the womanhood I'd seen. So there was a lot of like, oh my God, we need to make this happen, and we need to document this. So yeah, and then the result of that, which took another however many years to actually turn the footage into a film because we went through life, became Love, Marriage in Kabul, the film, the documentary.
So even that language, like this marriage had to happen, give me what was just a couple of things that were in the way of it happening. See, this is things that a lot of people can't even relate to. What do you mean? What's in the way? If they want to get married, they get married. What really happens?
So what really happened is that and I talk about this in the book, and it's in the film. It's the main story of the film. And to get more exactly the detail, I recommend you watch the film and read the book. Is that the sum of it is that her father wanted too much money for a dowry.
Okay.
So he wanted too much money, and he was a little bit he was mentally affected by the whole because his wife died during when he was in prison, so he was not all there. So he was preventing the marriage, so he would change his word every day. And like Abdul Fattah, who is the boy, he didn't have any money because he was some boy who was supported by Mahbouba's promise. So there's that, and then there's cultural differences. So there's many different obstacles that prevented that. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like you're able to allow us in to see how a culture really works. Like even as you begin to describe little pieces of it, one of my friends who has an arranged marriage, for example, just being really close friends with her is just amazing because all the little innuendos that that entails. They have a fantastic marriage. It's so fascinating. It's interesting to me. But, there's just these little ins and outs around the culture. So I get that watching and reading your book will be the insight. So thank you for that. So you fought for this though, 14 years. There was not everybody said straight away, they didn't see the light as you'd hoped initially. So what was required of you to keep going for 14 years?
Yeah, well, when I actually had the idea for this book in 2006, right? So as soon as we got back from that first trip, I was like, I need to write this. So I wrote a draft of whatever happened in that trip. And I started approaching publishers, I started approaching agents, and then they're like, well, not really, there's not really story here. And I was like, well, all right, we'll park it. So when 2009 happened, then that whole story with the making of the second film happened. And I was like, well, there's definitely a story here. So I wrote that piece. Then as soon as we got back, I wrote that. And then that took a while because I was in the midst of a PhD. I was in the midst of running the Persian Film Festival. We went through a separation. I moved to Melbourne, so all of that was happening. And then I was persistent. I was like, no, I need to do this. So I wrote draft after draft and then send it to agents, send it to publishers, rejections. And then people pointed me in different directions. You should get it edited. So I did it. I edited it and then submitted. And then there was one point, many points where I was like, you know what? Maybe I should just give up. Yeah. And then something would come up and I go, well, no, if I give this up, that to me is it just feels wrong. There's something about it that I need to get this out. So I kept persisting, editing, rewriting, approaching people. And what really made a difference was when I submitted it for the Peter Blasey Award, 2018, 17, 18. And I forgot about it because, as I do, it's become such a thing that I just submit it to places and then I'll get a rejection or some kind of an interest. And then one day I get an email saying I won the prize. And I'm like, huh, oh my God, this is like incredible. So that prize really made a difference because what happened was I got a new interest in the manuscript. So I started working on it, revisiting it. And interestingly enough, when I re-edited the manuscript, one of my friends suggested go and check out this publisher called Gazebo Books. And so I'll go onto their website, checking out to see what they got. And the first thing that I see is Peter Blasey's memoir. And I'm like, what? Because Peter Blasey was a gay activist, but he's not really well known, right? And unless you're looking for him, he's not really well known. And so this publisher had published Peter Blasey's memoir, and it turned out that Peter Blasey's partner was one of the founding members of this publishing house. And so there was a link, there was like an interest. And then when I emailed them, I said, look, I've just won this prize, which is, you guys may be interested. And he was like, that is perfect. This, he's like, that is just perfect for us. And it turned out that actually Xavier, the publisher, he comes from an NGO background. His partner is now in Kabul, in and out with NGOs. So it was like, could this get any more aligned? So when this happened, I was like, wow, this is all that work and all that rejection and all that near publications. There was a reason for it, and it was meant to be that I align with this particular publisher.
So I want to give people a little teaser about your new project around manifestation. But before that, can you make a distinction from what you now know about persisting? There was a sense of like for 14 years, persisting and aligning. You know, like when all of a sudden it went from no, 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 no to this is perfect. You're exactly what we've been looking for. Like that seems like opposite to what you've been experiencing. What do you think, from what you now know about manifesting, what do you think was going on in for you in those prior years versus when it finally just all started to click?
Well, a couple of things. There's this force. So what I've learned over the years is that if I want to force an outcome, it usually doesn't, because it's coming from from a space of I want something to happen, and that I is usually not coming from a space of like it's ego driven. And I think that's, for me, that was actually a huge part of this journey, was when I started it 2006. It was all about the women. It was all about like, I need to tell these women's stories, right? And what happened is, me being human, as we are all, what kicked in for me was, uh, okay, which publisher do I want to publish? Which prize do I want to aim for? What am I going to get from this? What am I going to like? It all became about I. How am I going to do this? Well, I don't want it to be like that. I don't want it to look like that. And so I got in the way. I really did. And there was a lot of like me pushing and wanting things to look a certain way. And there was a point where I was like, you know what? And it took a lot of self work. It didn't come easily and naturally. It took a lot of reflection and self work in other areas of my life to go, you know what? You're in your own way. Just
Mm.
get out of your own way and let things align and happen. And as soon as I had that understanding, that opening, then it didn't matter. It wasn't about me anymore. And I was able to connect to the original intention of why I wanted to do this. And then when that really aligned, it was like, it was easy. It just happened. Because I got out of the way.
Mm. And is
So
that what your new project is about? Can you give us just a little bit of what you now are creating so that other people can maybe have that moment that you've just described for themselves?
well, the project that I'm creating is it comes from my own personal experience of manifestation and creation. So as I said, I'm a very big journaler, if you can call it that. So I journal a lot, and I reflect a lot, and I project, and I put ideas out a lot. So over the years, I've realized that, you know what, like, we can design every aspect of our lives like how we want it, but as I said, like, you need to first align, right? um and so what I'm working on is a series of journals that people can take in different areas of their lives, and then go through a process of manifestation and getting clear on exactly what they want. And these journals would include everything from how you want your ideal partner to look like, or what kind of partner you want to call into your life, rather, and what kind of birth you want for your child, what kind of family do you want to create. Because I really believe that we are the effect. We're not at the effect of. And once we get that, then creation becomes easy. And I hope that these little things that I'm creating, journals, will help that click for people,
Because
through that
you told me a
process.
distinction though, like when sometimes when people want to design something, they kind of write this almost like a place to order partner that they want or something. But you said something really important, because almost like with your book, I want it to be like this and I want the publish, these demands. What's the difference between what you're doing and like what you're showing through this journaling process? There was a little distinction there.
There is the distinction is this. For example, let's take the partner one, because it's
Mhm.
easier to give it as an example. So a lot of people, including myself, when I was single, would go, I want this kind of a man, and he has got to look like this and that and that and that. It's like a shopping list. And then the ideal man could be walking into your life, and you look at your shopping list and you go, well, he ticks this box, he doesn't tick that box. And it's all about like what I want, right? But the distinction here is getting interested in yourself and going, well, yeah, that's what I want, but what am I creating and what am I putting out there? And what kind of an experience do I want to have and create? And I'm going to call that person into my life to co-create that experience with me. Right? So it will be like, I want to, for example, live an adventurous life, and I want to travel to South America, and I want to do these things. And these are my values, right? And when you get really clear on what your own values are, then you project that and you go, I want to co-create this, and I want to invite somebody to share this experience with me. It's not like, oh, you're going to have to come and make me happy. No, it's like, I'm going to create this, and you're going to come into my life, and we're going to co-create this and be happy together. And if you go away, okay, you go away. I'm still happy because I'm creating this experience and I'm offering to share it with you. And what happens in that process is, if a person comes along who doesn't want to have that experience with you, then okay, you're not up for the fun stuff that I'm gonna have. Okay, too bad, too sad for you.
Yeah,
it's not.
We're not aligned. Yeah,
we're not aligned. I'm not gonna sulk over and go, well, you don't love me, or I'm gonna do something to make you love me, because, all right, well, you're gonna miss out on the experience that I'm creating. And when you come from that perspective, it's in all areas of life, where it be like what my career is, like what do I want to project, what do I want to bring to the world, even through this book, what do I want to bring into the world, as opposed to what prize do I want to win, what do I want to get from it. It shifts the focus, and it opens something up for real manifestation and real creation.
What you're sharing, I find it really profound. I've got like all these friends in my mind that will totally benefit from what you just shared, because I really got that distinction between demanding of life and creating. And creating is, like you said, it's easy because we all have the power to do it. It's an access. You can do it right now, and there's no demands, there's no force on it. And yeah, I just think that it sounds like it's logical, but for a lot of people, this is groundbreaking and really beautifully said. Very much looking forward to reading your book and watching. I'm going to read the book first. That's just what I love to do. And so we're going to put in the show notes how people can do that, because I know people are going to instantly go, well, how can I do this? How can I get this? And so we'll do that for sure. And I just want to thank you for opening yourself up and just being so honest. And I think we can all really relate to your experience of resiliency and how you just let go. And then it all and then it came to pass. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you so much.